Today's lecture is about personnel planning and recruiting. We're going to provide an introduction to this chapter. This chapter explains the main techniques used in employment planning and forecasting and discusses the main outside sources of candidates. It also indicates the effective recruitment and the main techniques HR managers depend on to recruit job candidates and discuss the main internal and external sources of candidates. As this slide shows, the recruitment process begins with a careful investigation of the number of positions that need to be fulfilled and the type of positions needed. Afterwards, the HR managers attempt to build a pool of candidates. In other words, the HR managers search for possible ways to recruit candidates, whether from inside the company or outside the company. Afterwards, the HR managers ask candidates to complete application forms, and in this stage, usually candidates may pass. The candidates who submitted the application forms may pass through a screening process. In other words, the HR managers and or specialists will screen out the necessary the application forms and filter out the application forms whose candidates do not possess the required capabilities and skills. Afterwards, the HR managers will move successful application forms into the next stage. In this sense, the HR manager will ask the successful candidates to pass through some exams, some tests. We will take a look about these selection tests, and after the candidates get successful, the HR managers will move to the fifth step, which is to make an offer or having the supervisor and perhaps others on the team to interview the candidates. Afterwards, if you take a look at this step, the HR managers must first depend on a careful planning and forecasting management process, where HR managers decide on the positions the firm will have to fill and how to fill them. It's very important to answer this question: how to fill such a points. Okay, what are HR managers aiming to forecast? What do they want to forecast? Actually, if you take a look at this point, HR managers depend on overall. HR managers should first forecast the overall personnel needs, regardless of the number of departments, regardless of this. In this sense, also, HR managers depend or attempt to investigate the supply of inside and outside candidates. You have to know that HR managers may have two sources of candidates fulfillment, whether from inside the company or outside the company. In other words, HR managers may depend from candidates who already work from inside the company to fulfill the new positions. If the capabilities of the internal candidates do not match the requirements of the new job, HR managers may then move to other sources outside the company. There are many different forecasting techniques that HR managers depend on. One of them is the trend analysis. The trend analysis is the simplest approach. Of forecasting. In this technique, HR managers depend on the employment rate in the last few years. Depending on such employment rate, HR managers may forecast the requirements for the next years. So the employment needs for the next year may be dependent on the requirements on the employment rate which happened in the last 2 or 3 years. So they depend on the same rate of employment. Another technique is the ratio analysis. Another technique is the ratio analysis. In this analysis, HR managers associate the company's employment needs with certain parameters, with certain factors, with certain ratios. These ratios may involve, for example, if we have an example here, for example, the number of in a hospital, for example, if HR managers need to expect the number of nurses needed to satisfy the company's needs, they may associate the number of nurses to the number of beds served in the company, so that if every bed needs 2 shifts of 2 nurses, then and we have 2 shifts per day, this means that we need 2 nurses per bed, so that if the number of beds increased to 100, this means that we need around 200 nurses next year. This is called the ratio analysis. HR managers can demonstrate the ratio analysis in a graphical form, which we usually call the scatter plot. In this sense, the HR manager provides a slope such as this, which indicates in a graphical form the relationship between the number of registered nurses and hospital A size. Of course, you can take a look here at the drawbacks to scatter plot. We have some drawbacks here. For example, if you take a look at the first step, they focus on projections and historical relationships. Yes, somehow they focus that they assume that the firm's existing structure and activities will continue in the future. Yes, suppose that a new technology in serving patients has emerged. This technology may reduce the number of nurses needed. In this sense, the relationship between the number of beds and the number of nurses needed will have to be adjusted due to technological developments. Another major drawback is that they generally do not consider the impact the company's strategic initiatives may have on future staffing levels. Yes, and this is also related to the example that I have already put. The company's strategies may aim or may attempt to develop the technologies needed to serve patients. Therefore, these strategic initiatives or these strategic steps may alter the shape of the relationship between beds and number of nurses. If the technology has improved dramatically, then we may not need this large number of nurses in the future, after all. Of course, there are many other drawbacks. For example, they tend to bake in the non-productive area that increases in staff are inevitable. In other words, here sometimes HR managers may use such techniques, or may benefit from the large number of employees who will be hired in order to improve their compensation, their own personal compensation. So they benefit also always from the regressed relationship between the number of employees needed and the ratios needed. Sometimes HR managers depend on computers to forecast personnel requirements. Nowadays, in the 21st century, and actually in the 20th century, software technology has developed a lot, so that it can now enable HR managers to determine the future staff needs through expecting the number of sales and the volume or the magnitude of production needed, and the personnel needed to satisfy such increased volume of production and sales. In other words, HR managers may depend on developed software programs in order to be able to relate the relationship between personnel needed and sales projected and the volume of production. Only this is a very easy step which does not need the intervention of human factor. Actually, only computers and softwares developed computers and softwares can serve HR managers in this respect. HR managers, as I have already told you, HR managers can depend on the company's internal sources of employees in order to satisfy its needs for vacant jobs. One of the major techniques that HR managers may depend on in order to forecast the supply of internal candidates is to depend on qualification inventories. A qualification inventory is just a manual or a computerized record listing. It is a manual which highlights the employee's major educational experience, career and development interests, and other related skills. In this sense, this qualification inventory is like a list of the employees' capabilities and resources and skills. This enables HR managers to conduct an accurate comparison between internal candidates and decide whether existing candidates can really effectively supply or satisfy the company's needs for future appointments or not. This is a very important step here, by the way. The HR managers may also depend on different charts and other systems. One of them is the personnel replacement charts. Personnel replacement charts records the present performance and promotability of inside candidates for the most important positions. In this sense, the replacement chart is a chart which highlights the major performance levels of existing employees according to different performance criteria. Depending on these records, HR managers can also decide whether existing candidates or some of them or one of them is enough or can satisfy the future needs of a job. Another technique is called the position replacement card. The position replacement card. The position replacement card is a card prepared for each position in a company. Yes, this card shows possible replacement candidates and their qualifications. Yes, this is a very good point, because in the position replacement chart, as you take a look at slide 14, this is a typical position replacement chart which defines three alternative candidates who can replace the vacant job of the division vice president. For example, we have the vice president, the production vice president, the sales vice president, and the finance vice president. These are three internal candidates who can replace the existing vice president of the division. If you take the different colors, these different colors determine and differentiate between the three candidates in terms of capabilities, in terms of performance and promotability. It is really great to be able to define alternatives for every for every important vacant job, because this will save a lot of time and energy for HR managers when things get worse and the requirement of a new candidate is a necessity. Of course, HR managers, which depend on information technology and developed information systems, may also be depend on such computerized information systems or human resource information systems in order to be able to access detailed information about their employees, so that HR managers in the 21st century tend to save huge records about their employees' achievements, experience, and whatever, and the formal and their formal education in the company's database, in the company's information system related database. This can also save a lot of money, effort for HR managers in order to make the correct decisions concerning the development or the hiring and recruitment of the existing candidate. Of course, one important step that HR managers have to take into account is the privacy of HR information. HR managers need to ensure for every employee that the information available about their personal experience or any kind of information that is related to their employees are kept in private, so that no other person has the authority to access such private information. So organizations, respectable organizations, well-established organizations, ethical organizations are usually obliged to keep employees' information private, so that no one unless is authorized to be able to access such information. HR managers have also to forecast the supply of outside candidates through investigating the general economic conditions of the society, overall, and the general economic and employment conditions of every business sector, especially the business sectors where the company operates. There are many different sources of information which can supply the company with information regarding employment opportunities. For example, in the US, HR managers can access information such as from the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the official website of the US Department of Labor, and so on. There are many different factors which may affect the company's ability to recruit. One of them is the actual unavailability of qualified workers. Some countries may have deficiencies, may have shortage in the supply of qualified or highly skilled employees in particular sectors. In this sense, HR managers have to really calculate this shortage and to find out ways to satisfy this particular need. In this sense, HR managers may search for candidates from outside the company itself, from outside the country itself, not only the company. There are some other factors which might affect the efficiency of the recruitment process. For example, the inconsistency. Consistency بمعنى ترابط. The inconsistency عدم الترابط. The inconsistency of the firm's recruitment efforts with its strategic goals. For example, HR managers may not be informed enough so that they apply recruitment activities, they conduct recruitment activities and recruit employees whose capabilities and skills do not match the company's aspirations and strategic goals. And from my own personal experience, I have found some universities, or let me say, some Egyptian organizations which actually hire employees they don't need. Or yes, these companies need employees, but with certain capabilities and skills. The newly hired candidates, actually, their capabilities and skills do not match these required skills. Therefore, the company recruit many people without knowing that such new candidates will not add value to the company's overall product. Therefore, the inconsistency, the mismatch, the incompatibility between the company's recruitment efforts and strategic goals can lead to an ineffective recruitment activity. Okay. This slide investigates the advantages of centralizing recruitment. Okay, this slide can be read in more detail in the book, so I advise you to read from the book this particular aspect. It talks about centralizing the recruitment process within the organization, how to centralize the recruitment process within organization. Some organizations may depend on a centralized recruitment office, whereas some companies may assign a recruitment office for every department. One important question that is important to answer is what to measure and how to measure. How to measure recruitment effectiveness. If you remember from the earlier lectures, when I briefly talked about the recruitment process, HR managers measure the recruitment efficiency not by the number of not by the number of applicants who were attracted, but actually by the number of qualified applicants. So the quality of the recruitment process is measured through the number of qualified candidates the company is able to bring. This is the point. It's not about the quantity of people, but it is about the quantity and quality of candidates who are attracted. Okay, sometimes one of the major best practices in recruitment is to use a benchmarks-oriented approach to analyzing and measuring the effectiveness of recruiting activities, such as employee referrals. Here, this is the recruiting yield pyramid. It shows the percentage between the candidates who were generated, the candidates who were invited, those who were interviewed, and the offers made, and the new hires. It certainly determines that the recruitment process is a heavy, difficult activity, not usually very time consuming, but it is a heavy activity. It is a complicated activity. Imagine the percentage between the new hires and the leads generated. It is 50 out of 1,200, which represents that effective companies usually have the capability to accurately select the needed candidates. Of course, there are some advantages associated with hiring candidates from internal sources. The main advantages of hiring people from inside the company is the foreknowledge of candidates' strengths and weaknesses. HR managers have already accurate lists which define the quality, and performance levels of existing candidates, through earlier performance records. Depending on such records, the HR managers can accurately select internal sources of candidates. In other words, HR managers, when hiring from inside the company, they have more accurate view of candidates' skills. They have more accurate view of candidates' skills. Also, from the major advantages, one of the major advantages of hiring from inside the company is that candidates have a stronger commitment to the company. Internal candidates who were successful in the recruitment process will have the morale, will have the motivation to exert extra effort in order to get promoted also again in the future. In this sense, hiring from inside the company gives constructive signals to existing employees that if you work hard, you can promote it to higher jobs, to higher positions. Also, one of the main advantages of hiring from internal sources is that internal candidates do not need orientation programs. Yes, they already know the company. They already know its ethics and principles. Therefore, they don't need any tutorials to learn about their company again. This advantage cannot be satisfied when hiring from outside the company. Hiring from outside the company means that you are hiring new people who don't know anything about the organization. Therefore, such new employees will need orientation programs. Okay. However, on the other hand, there are some internal disadvantages associated with hiring from inside the company. One of them is that if those who were not successful in the completion of the new job may feel discontented, may feel not happy, may feel depressed. But I have here one point to declare, is that they may feel discontented, but if the company apply justified and fair recruitment procedures, such discontent is meaningless. Yes, any unsuccessful candidate should feel sad, but if the selection process is based on justified, fair, and ethical procedures, then this will reduce the magnitude of discontent that existing employees might feel when they fail. But the major disadvantage of hiring from within the company is the inbreeding of the status quo. The inbreeding of the status quo. The inbreeding of the status quo. What do we mean by the inbreeding of the status quo? Hiring from within the company means that the company does not hire new people. One advantage of hiring new people, new candidates from outside the company, is that the company can get employees with new way of thinking, which will help the company think out of the box sometimes. Existing candidates who work for very long periods of time may not have new ideas, or may have very few new ideas, may not be able to satisfy the company's needs for thinking creatively in new ideas, because they have already spent many years working inside the company. Therefore, successful companies tend to depend on external sources of candidates when they, especially at leadership positions, when they really need to make a groundbreaking change to their strategy. Groundbreaking change means dramatic change in the strategic initiatives it wants to take in the future. In this context, HR managers and the organization may attempt to hire from outside in order to help supply the company with people who can infuse new ideas and creative ideas inside the company. There are many methods by which companies or HR managers can depend on to find internal candidates. One of them is the job posting. Job posting means to publicize an open job to employees and listing its attributes. Publicizing an open job to employees and listing its attributes. In the official website, in the company's official website, the company can use the open website to announce for its jobs. Maybe website, maybe it's maybe to any other journals or newspapers. Okay, the company also may depend on hiring former employees, those who were working in the past in the company. Hiring former employees have some advantages. Well, they are very well known in terms of capabilities, skills, and performance. These former employees may know the company well. They know its culture. They don't need any extra. They don't need extra orientation programs. However, the main disadvantage associated with rehiring former employees is that such former employees may have less than positive attitudes. They may have left the company because they don't like it, or because they have some concerns about the company, so that when they come back, these negative concerns may still arise, may still exist, unless it is solved. Today, that's it. We have finished our first part of chapter 3. In the next week, inshallah, we are going to finish this chapter. Thank you very much.